So what is this term land hacking? So most people don't realize that you can buy one house with very few dollars out of pocket, that you can set up 10, 20, or 50 little rental units on that pay you continuously. So imagine having one mortgage payment on the house that you were gonna live in anyway, and you've got 20 different rental units set up on that one property. So how is this possible? Well, the trick is that the house that you're buying just sits on or is adjacent to more land than you would envision in a typical house purchase. So in this video, I'm going to share with you how we did this, or I guess are in the process of doing this on this land. And I'm also going to break down a simpler step-by-step process if you want to do something similar. About 9 months ago, my wife and I bought this house here in Valparaiso, Indiana, which sits on 10 acres of land and is about 10 minutes from the Indiana Dunes National Park in Lake Michigan. And when we purchased this house, it had been vacant for about 10 or 15 years. So it needed a ton of TLC, but the good thing was it was livable. So we could buy it using a conventional loan with only 10% down as a second residence. So we already had a house we were living in, so we bought it as a second house, which requires 10% down. So that was the first step. The very next step is we gutted the property. We tried to keep some of that farmhouse appeal, but we made everything all new inside. And if you want to see the transformation of the inside, you can check it out in this video. So after a few months, we finished up the rehab of the house itself, and we were able to move in from our old house over here to the new house. And that's when the real fun began, because there was a ton to do outside. So that's when we started on the outside projects. And one of the things that came with this property is this 100-year-old barn, this wooden barn that we thought we were gonna have to just level because it was really leaning sideways. They had kept cows in here for years and they had pushed out the side, and I was shocked that it was still standing. And so we toyed with the idea of potentially saving it, and so we did a few things to see if we could, save the structure. One thing led to another, and eventually we decided just to fully renovate the entire barn. And so where I'm standing here, this used to be stalls right here, and they kept cows in here, and so we decided to take the stall, the wood from the stalls, and we used it on the walls here because there was lots of gaps, lots of rotted wood. And so we were able to reclaim that wood that was being used for stalls for the exterior of the barn. And then we still didn't have enough wood, so we'd installed all these windows. And what we realized is that this is another revenue generator on the property because there's a lot of people who look for a venue like this. We've got also the loft up here, which we refinished, and it seats even more people. So we think small wedding ceremonies and receptions could be hosted here on the property, and it's just one more revenue generator on a land hack like this. And finally, as an additional value add, we rehabbed the 4.5 car garage, which was already on the property. It was, again, in really rough shape, and we're in the process of setting up my wife's antique shop in here. So she's always wanted to start a boutique antique shop. It'll be another revenue driver, and we initially were gonna set it up in this red pole barn, which is back here. But once I started calculating the cost of rehabbing the pole barn and heating and cooling it, it made more sense to start on a smaller scale. And we even have our little chickens living in the garage, which hopefully are gonna be providing us breakfast very soon, right, Rex? Yeah. Yeah. Say hi, chicken. Hi, chicken. So now while we were doing all of this build out and moving into the new property, we were also working to sell our previous property. And our previous property had a VA loan on it. So we needed to sell that first to free up that benefit so that we could refinance this property into the VA loan. And at the same time, we were working on buying the 35 acres next door to the 10 acres that had the house on it. Because once we bought that 35 acres, we could combine all 45 acres now, the 10 acres with the house on it, plus the 35 acres of land, and refinance it all into one VA loan. And what the bank does is they'll appraise the entire 45 acres with the house on it, and they'll give you 90% of that value in a loan. So they'll give you a 90% cash out refinance in a VA loan, which has an extremely low interest rate. Ironically, actually, we just got the appraisal back last night for the entire property together. So the initial 10 acres that the house sits on and the new 35 acres that we just recently purchased right next door. So it's a one loan for the 45 acres with the house. And one thing to keep in mind is that when you combine property together, it's often less valuable than when you divide property. That's why developers buy big parcels and then they subdivide it, because you can get more value out of it. So we were hoping for a valuation of about $750 because we bought the initial 10 acres with the house on it for $249, and we put about $150 into it, and then we bought the 35 acres next door for $335. So we were hoping for about $750, but it came in at $625, which we're in the process of appealing. So you can go back and you can appeal, and I think we'll get it raised to closer to $700. But it's something to keep in mind, because residential appraisers, they're not going to look at the potential of the land. They're just going to look at comps in the area, and that's how they're going to come up with it. Even though this 35 acres actually has 6 separate lots that are like 6-acre lots or something like that, and we could divide those up and sell them each for probably around $100,000. I know I just covered a lot, so let me just break down the steps again in case you're interested in doing something similar. So step number 1 is to find a house, preferably a beat-up house that you can rehab and add some value to, that sits on land or is adjacent to land that you can purchase as well. Step number 2 is to add as much value to that property as possible. So for a residential property, if you're looking to increase the appraisal, most likely the biggest value add is going to come from rehabbing the house, improving the house itself, because that's typically the biggest thing that the appraiser is going to look at. Step number 3 is to get the property refinanced at the new higher appraisal amount so that you can pull out as much cash as possible and use that to build up the rentals on the property. So if you qualify for the VA loan, that's a great way to do it, because they'll give you 90% of the appraised value. So we bought the adjacent land with cash, and then we refinanced the whole property together under one loan, under one VA loan, and we're getting 90% of the appraised value. Step number 4 is to work with your local county to get what's often referred to as a variance of usage, which means that the property that you just bought most likely is going to be zoned residential or agriculture, and you're just going to need to get a variance to be allowed to use it as some sort of short-term rental facility. And a lot of times in rural areas, the county's willing to work with you to approve some version of that. So you might bring in your vision and they might ask you to tweak it a little bit, but a lot of times they want to bring in new business, so they'll work with you on it. So finally, the last step is to build out your vision. So whether it's the tiny houses or tents or a glamping site or yurts, I'm sure you can imagine on the land behind me some tents tucked into the tree line or some tiny houses, and people from the city, they want to come out and they want to unplug, they want to recharge, they want to soak in nature a little bit, spend some time on the farm. So our plan is to provide that at what we're calling the Good Farm, and it's going to be something that's really enjoyable for us, and it's going to be extremely profitable. If this video sparked some ideas for you and got the wheels turning on how you could potentially do something similar, hit the like button. Also hit subscribe so that you can be notified when future videos are released. We're going to continue to release videos on how the whole build out is going and how this is all coming together. You can also join me in the Living Off Rentals Facebook group. It's a very active community where we talk about topics just like this on a regular basis. So I hope to see you there, but if not, I'll see you in the next video.